The stars had always whispered secrets to those who listened, but on that cold November night, they screamed. Lieutenant David Harper stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, his coffee forgotten in his hand as he watched something impossible unfold before his eyes. A ship, unlike anything humanity had ever conceived, descended through the darkness with the grace of a falling feather. Its hull absorbed light rather than reflected it, creating a void in the cosmos that made his stomach turn. David was 36, weathered by 12 years of military service and 3 tours in orbital defense. His brown eyes had seen meteor showers and satellite debris, solar flares and distant nebulae, but nothing had prepared him for this. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of their station, shaped like a crescent blade with edges that seemed to cut through space itself. Beside him, Dr. Rachel Kim pressed her face against the reinforced glass, her analytical mind racing to process what her instruments were telling her. She was brilliant, perhaps too brilliant for her own comfort, with black hair pulled back in a perpetual ponytail and glasses that constantly slid down her nose. Her fingers danced across her tablet, recording every detail. "It's not broadcasting any signals," she whispered, her voice tight with barely contained excitement and fear. "No radiation signature, no heat bloom, nothing. It's like a ghost." "Ghosts don't park themselves in low Earth orbit," replied Thomas Grant from behind them. He was their communications officer, a veteran of 20 years who had volunteered for this posting to escape a messy divorce. His gray beard and calm demeanor usually brought comfort to the crew, but now his hands trembled as he adjusted his headset. "Mission Control wants us to maintain distance and observe only." David nodded slowly, but his eyes never left the alien craft. Something about it called to him, a feeling he couldn't explain and didn't particularly like. In his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him that everything was about to change. Down on Earth, panic spread like wildfire. News channels broadcast footage of the vessel 24 hours a day. Religious leaders proclaimed it the end times or the beginning of a new age. Scientists argued on television about whether this was first contact or an invasion. Governments mobilized their militaries while trying to maintain calm among their populations. President Catherine Walsh sat in the Situation Room, surrounded by military advisors and scientists who all spoke at once, their voices blending into an incomprehensible roar. She was 52, the first female president, and had spent her career building bridges between nations. Now she faced a challenge that made international diplomacy look simple. "Silence," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The room fell quiet. "General Patterson, what are our options?" General Marcus Patterson was a bull of a man, broad-shouldered and square-jawed, with medals covering his chest and eyes that had seen too many wars. "Madam President, we have 6 fighter squadrons ready to launch, and our railgun satellites are tracking the vessel. We can engage if necessary. And if we fire first and ask questions later, we might doom our entire species," interrupted Dr. Howard Lynn, the chief of NASA. He was elderly, with wispy white hair and hands that shook from early Parkinson's, but his mind remained razor-sharp. "This is potentially the most important moment in human history. We need to try communication." Catherine studied the image of the alien ship on the main screen. "How do we communicate with something that won't talk to us?" "We send someone up there," Dr. Lin replied. "Someone who represents the best of what humanity can be." Back on the space station, David received the transmission he had been dreading. "Lieutenant Harper, you've been selected to lead a boarding party to the alien vessel. You'll take Dr. Kim and engineer Roberto Diaz with you. Your mission is to establish peaceful contact and gather information." Roberto Diaz was the youngest of the crew at 28, fresh from MIT with degrees in mechanical and aerospace engineering. His hands were always stained with grease, and his smile could light up a room, but now his face was pale as he suited up for the mission. "You know this is crazy, right?" Roberto said, checking his equipment for the 3rd time. "We're about to board a ship from another world, and we have no idea if they're friendly or if they eat humans for breakfast. That's why we're bringing snacks, David replied dryly, attempting humor he didn't feel. Maybe we can trade. Rachel secured her scientific instruments to her suit. My analysis suggests the ship has been dormant for at least several days. Power readings are minimal, life support appears to be on standby. It's possible the crew is in some form of suspended animation. Or it's a trap, Thomas called from the communications station. An empty ship to lure us in while the real threat waits. David sealed his helmet. Only one way to find out. Their shuttle detached from the station with a soft hiss of compressed air. As they drifted toward the alien vessel, the enormity of what they were attempting settled over David like a heavy blanket. He thought of his daughter, Emily, 8 years old and probably watching this on television with his ex-wife. He thought of all the people on Earth, billions of souls whose fate might depend on what happened in the next few hours. The alien ship grew larger in their viewport, its dark surface seeming to swallow their running lights. Up close, they could see patterns etched into the hull, mathematical equations perhaps, or writing in a language older than human civilization. The airlock, if that's what it was, dilated open like an iris, inviting them inside. Well, Roberto breathed, that's not ominous at all. David gripped the controls. Rachel, record everything. Roberto, keep the shuttle ready for a quick exit. And everyone remember, we're ambassadors first, soldiers second. And if they don't care about the distinction? Roberto asked. Then we run very, very fast. The interior of the alien vessel swallowed them in darkness so complete it seemed alive. David led the way, his helmet light cutting through the void like a knife through silk. The beam revealed walls that weren't quite walls, surfaces that shifted subtly when observed directly, as if the ship itself was breathing. The air inside registered as breathable on their sensors, nitrogen and oxygen in ratios similar to Earth, but none of them dared remove their helmets. Temperature is dropping, Rachel reported, her voice crackling through the comm system. -5 degrees Celsius and falling. Whatever heating system this thing has, it's either offline or they prefer it cold. Roberto ran his gloved hand along the wall, and the surface rippled beneath his touch like water. This material, it's nothing we have in any database. It's responding to physical contact, maybe even to bioelectrical fields. This isn't just a ship, it's almost organic. They moved deeper into the vessel, their magnetic boots clicking softly against the floor. The corridor stretched endlessly before them, curved and seamless, with no visible seams or joints. Symbols glowed faintly along the walls, pulsing in rhythm like a heartbeat. David couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking through the veins of some enormous sleeping creature. There, Rachel pointed ahead. Power signature increasing. Something is active in that direction. They emerged into a chamber that stole the breath from David's lungs. It was vast, cathedral-like in its dimensions, with a ceiling that soared into darkness above. In the center stood 7 cylindrical pods arranged in a circle, each filled with a luminescent fluid that shifted between blue and green. And inside each pod was a figure. The aliens were tall, perhaps 8 feet if standing, with bodies that seemed too thin to support their weight. Their skin was the color of deep ocean water, smooth and slightly translucent, showing the movement of fluids beneath. They had 4 arms, 2 positioned where humans would have them, and 2 smaller ones folded against their chests. Their heads were elongated, with large eyes hidden behind closed lids that had a silver sheen. "They're beautiful," Rachel whispered, moving closer to the nearest pod. "Look at the bone structure, the musculature. They evolved in a low-gravity environment, probably. And these smaller arms, they're specialized, see the extra joints? For fine manipulation work. They're also armed," Roberto noted grimly, pointing to weapons mounted on the walls. "Those look functional to me." David approached the central pod, drawn by something he couldn't name. The alien inside seemed different from the others. It wore what might have been a uniform, darker than its skin, with symbols etched across the chest. A leader perhaps, or a scientist. As David drew closer, the alien's eyes suddenly snapped open. They were completely black, like staring into the void of space itself, but within that darkness were pinpoints of light, like distant stars. The alien's gaze locked onto David, and in that moment, he felt a presence in his mind, gentle but insistent, like fingers brushing against his thoughts. Images flooded his consciousness. A world with two suns, crimson and gold, casting long shadows across cities of crystal and light. A civilization ancient beyond measure, built on curiosity and exploration. Ships like this one, thousands of them, sent out to catalog the universe and seek other thinking beings. But then darkness, spreading like a disease. Worlds going silent. Ships failing to return. And fear, terrible fear of something hunting them across the stars. David staggered back, his head pounding. It's telepathic. It just showed me their history. The alien in the central pod raised one long hand and pressed it against the transparent surface. Its mouth opened, revealing no teeth, just smooth ridges, and a sound emerged that their suit speakers barely captured. It was like music and mathematics combined, beautiful and incomprehensible. The translator is trying to parse it, Rachel said excitedly, working her tablet. It's complex, multidimensional. They communicate on levels we can barely detect. Wait, I'm getting something. It's saying its name is Keith. And it needs our help. The pod began to drain, the fluid flowing away through channels in the floor. Keith slumped forward as the glass slid open, and David caught the alien before it could fall. Up close, he could feel the coolness of its skin, smell something like ozone and rain. Keith was lighter than expected, its bones hollow like a bird's. Other pods began to open. 6 more aliens emerged, weak and disoriented. One of them, smaller than the others, approached Roberto and touched his helmet with a delicate hand. The gesture seemed almost childlike, curious rather than threatening. They're not warriors, Rachel said, her scientific detachment crumbling into wonder. They're explorers, scientists. Look at their equipment, it's all for research and documentation. Keith straightened, standing on legs that trembled but held. It turned its star-filled eyes to David and raised both primary hands in what might have been a greeting or a plea. The translator crackled to life with broken phrases. Danger, followed US, could not outrun, led it here, forgive. Led what here? David asked, though he wasn't sure Keith could understand him. The alien's response came not in words but in another rush of images. A ship, vast beyond comprehension, dark and angular where Keith's vessel was curved and flowing. It moved through space like a predator, leaving dead worlds in its wake. And it was coming to Earth, following the signal from Keith's damaged vessel. Oh no, Rachel breathed, seeing the same images through her equipment. They didn't come here by choice. They were running, and they led something terrible right to us. Alarms suddenly blazed throughout the ship. Red light bathed the chamber as the aliens began moving with sudden urgency, weak as they were. Keith grabbed David's arm with surprising strength and pulled him toward a viewing screen that materialized on the wall. Space rippled like disturbed water. Something was tearing through reality itself, something enormous and wrong. The Predator ship emerged, and even through the screen, David felt its malevolence. It was death given form, hunger made metal, and it had locked onto Earth like a wolf scenting blood. Mission Control, David said into his comm, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. We have a situation. The aliens aren't invaders, they're refugees. And the thing they were running from just arrived. Thomas's voice crackled back, tight with fear. We see it, David. That thing just destroyed one of our satellites like it was nothing. The military is scrambling every asset we have. Keith touched David's shoulder and pointed to the other aliens, then to Earth on the screen. The meaning was clear. These 7 had technology, knowledge, experience fighting this enemy. But they were exhausted, their ship damaged, their weapons depleted. Alone, they would fall. Alone, Earth would fall. But together, perhaps there was a chance. David looked at Rachel and Roberto, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. They had come here as explorers, as ambassadors. Now they would become something else. They would become the bridge between two species facing extinction. Keith, David said slowly, hoping the translator would convey his meaning. We'll help you. Teach us. Show us how to fight this thing. We're not going to let Earth become another dead world. The alien's expression was unreadable, but it placed a hand over its chest in what might have been gratitude or respect. Then it moved to the ship's controls, its long fingers dancing across surfaces that responded to its touch. The vessel shuddered to life, power flowing through systems that had been dormant. Weapon systems activated, showing charge levels far too low to be effective. Earth had hours, maybe less. 7 exhausted aliens and 3 humans against a force that had hunted across galaxies. The odds were impossible, the outcome almost certainly death. But David Harper had not come this far to surrender. Neither had humanity. And as he watched Keith coordinate with its crew, as he saw Rachel already deep in study of their technology and Roberto examining their weapons, he felt something unexpected bloom in his chest. Hope. The Predator ship hung in space like a wound in reality itself, its surface absorbing all light, all hope. Through the viewport of Keith's vessel, David watched as smaller craft began to detach from the massive hull, dozens of them, each one bristling with weapons that glowed an angry red. They moved with purpose, spreading out in a pattern that would encircle Earth within minutes. We need to buy time, David said, his mind racing through every tactical scenario he had ever studied. None of them had prepared him for this. If those fighters reach the atmosphere, millions will die in the first strike. Keith moved beside him, its 4 arms working across multiple control panels simultaneously. The translator had improved in the last few minutes, learning from their interactions, and now Keith's voice came through with haunting clarity. Our weapons are at 16% capacity. We can destroy perhaps 5 of their scouts before our systems fail. There are 43 approaching. Rachel was hunched over an alien console, her fingers flying as she tried to understand technology that seemed to operate on principles Earth science had never imagined. Their energy weapons use a quantum tunneling effect. If I can understand the mathematics, maybe we can boost the output, extend the charge. And maybe we explode instead, Roberto added, but he was already beside her, his engineer's mind dissecting the alien systems with remarkable speed. But if we're dying anyway, might as well die trying. One of the smaller aliens, the one who had touched Roberto's helmet earlier, approached David. Through the translator, a soft voice emerged, younger than Keith's, filled with a sorrow that transcended language barriers. I am Nyrith. I am the navigator. I guided us here, believing Earth might offer sanctuary. Instead, I brought death to your world. For this, I carry shame that weighs heavier than worlds. David knelt to meet Nyrith's eyes, those deep pools of starlight that seemed to hold galaxies. You didn't bring death. You brought a chance. Without you, without this warning, that thing would have caught us completely unprepared. You gave us something precious. You gave us time. Nyrith's expression shifted, something that might have been gratitude or perhaps the beginning of understanding. The alien reached out with a smaller hand and touched David's chest, right over his heart. Images flowed between them, but different this time. Not memories, but feelings. Nyrith showed him the beauty of their home world before the darkness came, the joy of discovery when they first detected Earth's radio signals, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, they had found allies instead of more victims. And David shared his own feelings in return. The love for his daughter, the pride in humanity's stubborn refusal to surrender, the dream that one day humans might walk among the stars as friends, not conquerors. In that moment of connection, species meant nothing. They were simply two beings who refused to let fear win. "Contact in 3 minutes," Keith announced. Its crew moved with practiced efficiency despite their weakness, each taking positions at stations throughout the chamber. "We will engage as many as possible. When our weapons fail, we will use the ship itself as a weapon. There is honor in this ending." Or, Thomas's voice crackled through David's comm, "You could let Earth's crazy species show you what we do when someone threatens our home." On the screen, David watched as every military satellite humanity possessed rotated to face the enemy. They were primitive compared to alien technology, railguns and missiles designed for orbital debris, but there were hundreds of them. And rising from Earth's surface, trailing fire and determination, came every fighter jet, every spacecraft, every weapon humanity could throw into the void. It was futile, David knew. Like attacking a tiger with pointed sticks. But it was also magnificent. "Your species fights," Keith observed, something like wonder in its voice. "Without understanding the enemy, without hope of victory, you still rise to battle. This is foolishness." "Yeah," David smiled behind his helmet. "It's kind of our thing." Rachel suddenly shouted, her voice sharp with excitement. "I've got it. The quantum tunneling, it's not just for weapons. It's how their entire ship operates. They don't just move through space, they partially exist outside of it. That's why our sensors couldn't read them properly." Roberto caught on immediately. "And if we could extend that field, project it outward as a shield instead of a weapon, we could protect Earth's fighters long enough for them to close distance." "The power requirements would be immense," Keith said, but its fingers were already moving, calculating. "We would drain every reserve, leave ourselves completely vulnerable." "Then we better make it count," David replied. The first wave of enemy scouts opened fire. Beams of crimson energy lanced through space, vaporizing 3 satellites instantly. But then Keith's ship responded, its quantum weapons spearing through 2 attackers with surgical precision. Human missiles followed, dozens of them, primitive but determined. Most were destroyed before reaching their targets, but a few got through, their explosions like flowers blooming in the darkness. Rachel and Roberto worked frantically, their human ingenuity combining with alien technology in ways neither species had imagined possible. The ship shuddered as they redirected power, every system screaming in protest. Keith's crew joined them, their long fingers guiding the humans, teaching them in moments what should have taken years to learn. And David realized something profound. This wasn't humans versus aliens, or one species saving another. This was what intelligence looked like when it worked together. This was what civilization meant when it rose above fear and pride. "Shield generators at maximum," Rachel announced. "Projecting now." A bubble of shimmering energy expanded from Keith's vessel, encompassing the approaching human fighters. Enemy fire struck it and bent away, harmlessly dispersed into empty space. Inside the shield, human pilots whooped with joy and pressed their attack with renewed ferocity. "It's working," Roberto laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "We're actually holding them off." But David saw what the others missed. The Predator ship, the massive one, was moving. Not toward Earth, but toward them. It had identified the threat, the source of the shield, and it was coming to eliminate them personally. Keith saw it too. "We have perhaps 1 minute before it arrives. When it does, our ship will be destroyed instantly. You should take your shuttle and flee while you can." "Not happening," David said firmly. "We finish this together." Nyrith moved to David's side, followed by the other aliens. They stood in a circle, human and alien, their hands touching in a gesture that transcended culture. In that moment, David felt something he had never experienced before. He felt their thoughts, their emotions, their determination. 7 aliens who had lost their world but refused to lose their purpose. 3 humans who had found something worth dying for. The enemy ship filled their viewport, close enough now that they could see details. Weapons ports opening like hungry mouths. Energy building for a strike that would erase them from existence. Whatever happens next, David said quietly, I want you all to know, this was an honor. All of it. The honor is ours, Keith replied, and around the circle, the others echoed the sentiment in their own ways. But then Rachel gasped. Wait. The shield, we've been using it defensively. But the quantum tunneling works both ways. If we inverted it, compressed instead of expanded, we could create a singularity. A small one, controlled, but powerful enough to swallow that ship whole, Roberto finished, his eyes wide. But the calculations would have to be perfect. Any error and we create a black hole that consumes Earth instead. Then we don't make errors, David said simply. They had seconds. The enemy fired. And in those final moments before the beam reached them, human and alien minds worked as one, fingers dancing across controls, mathematics flowing like poetry, science and desperation combining into something beautiful. The shield collapsed inward, reality folding like paper. The enemy's weapon struck first, but the singularity was already forming, already hungry. The beam bent, curved, disappeared into the impossible space they had created. And then the Predator ship followed, pulled inexorably into the gravity well, its massive bulk crumpling like tin foil as it vanished into nothingness. Silence fell across the void. Then, from Earth, from every ship and station, cheers erupted. Humanity celebrated, not knowing the full story, not understanding that 7 exhausted aliens had taught 3 humans how to punch holes in reality itself. Inside Keith's ship, David fell to his knees, exhaustion finally claiming him. Around him, the aliens slumped in similar relief. They had done the impossible. They had survived. Nyrith touched David's shoulder gently. You saved us. You saved your world. You saved mine, in a way, by proving that hope still exists in this universe. David looked up at the young alien, then at Keith, at all of them. We saved each other. That's what matters.